Let's talk about something fascinating, something that bridges biology, psychology, and emotional intimacy. The title of today's talk, All Women Cry from Pleasure in This Position, is deliberately provocative, but behind it lies a profound physiological and psychological truth. We're not talking about a singular sexual position or a sensational claim. We're talking about a position of nervous system alignment where emotional safety, neurochemical synchrony, and physical connection come together. In short, we're discussing the biological blueprint of deep pleasure and emotional release. Let's dive into something deeply physiological, yet often misunderstood, how the vagus nerve and parasympathetic nervous system govern not only our sense of calm and safety, but also the conditions under which profound pleasure and emotional release can occur. When we talk about someone crying from pleasure, particularly women, we're not discussing something mysterious or anecdotal. We're referring to a measurable biological state involving autonomic regulation, limbic system activity, and hormonal synchrony. It begins with the body's capacity to downshift from sympathetic arousal, the fight or flight state, into parasympathetic dominance. And the key player in that transition is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, which originates in the brainstem and innervates multiple organs throughout the body, plays a central role in emotional regulation, heart rate variability, digestion, and even voice tone. It's the biological highway of connection between the brain and body, and also between people. This nerve is activated during states of calm, trust, and social bonding. Its engagement is what allows us to experience what scientists call neuroception of safety, a term coined by Stephen Porges referring to the body's unconscious detection of cues that signal we are not in danger. Now, when the vagus nerve is optimally engaged, particularly through deep rhythmic breathing, sustained eye contact, physical touch, or close attuned proximity to another person, the body begins to shift into what's called a parasympathetic state. In this state, cortisol decreases, adrenaline subsides, and oxytocin increases. The heart rate slows down, the breath becomes deeper and more regular, and the brain enters a mode of rest and openness. What's particularly important to understand is that this parasympathetic state is not passive. It is fertile ground for emotional connection, heightened sensory awareness, and profound pleasure. Pleasure, especially in the context of intimacy, is not simply a mechanical or localized phenomenon. It is a full-body neurochemical cascade. And for women in particular, pleasure is intimately linked to emotional attunement and nervous system safety. If a woman's nervous system is not in a state of trust and safety, it becomes significantly more difficult for her to experience pleasure in its most expansive form. This isn't just psychological, it's physiological. The pelvic nerves, which carry sensation from the reproductive organs, communicate bidirectionally with the brain through the spinal cord and vagus nerve. If the vagus nerve is suppressed, say because of stress, anxiety, or a lack of emotional connection, then those sensory signals are dulled or disrupted. But when the vagus nerve is fully engaged and the parasympathetic system is dominant, something remarkable happens. Touch becomes more pleasurable, breath becomes more synchronized, eye contact feels grounding instead of overwhelming, and oxytocin, the neuropeptide involved in trust, bonding, and social recognition, begins to flood the system. Oxytocin doesn't just make us feel good, it actually alters the sensitivity of neurons in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and threat detection. With enough oxytocin, fear circuits begin to quiet down and the body becomes receptive. This hormonal shift is particularly pronounced in women whose oxytocin receptors are modulated by estrogen. That's why many women report feeling emotionally overwhelmed, in a good way, during moments of deep connection or pleasure. The tears that sometimes come are not from pain, sadness, or trauma. They are from the body releasing tension it has held for years, often without conscious awareness. In those moments, crying and pleasure coexist. They're not opposites, they are different expressions of the same nervous system transition. It is a release of pressure, of held energy, of protective barriers dissolving. That is what it means biologically to cry from pleasure. It is not a sign of weakness or emotional instability. It is the nervous system doing exactly what it's built to do when it finally feels safe. Let go. The body isn't just reacting, it's reorganizing, rebalancing, and allowing itself to feel. And at the center of that entire process is the vagus nerve, the silent conductor of emotional depth, physical pleasure, and neurochemical harmony. Oxytocin, often referred to as the love hormone or the bonding hormone, plays a central role in the experiences of emotional release and pleasure that can lead to crying in certain contexts. This neuropeptide is not just a molecule that facilitates childbirth or breastfeeding. It is fundamental to human connection, trust, and intimacy. In particular, the way oxytocin functions during deep emotional and physical interactions is a cornerstone of why crying from pleasure is not only possible, but biologically inevitable for some. At the molecular level, oxytocin's release is tied to the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for rest and recovery, as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system, which prepares the body for fight or flight. This transition is critical for individuals, especially women, to experience moments of deep emotional vulnerability. It's important to understand that oxytocin is not released in isolation. Its presence often follows moments of emotional or physical intimacy, such as a warm hug and intimate touch, or the feeling of being truly seen and heard in a trusting relationship. These moments lead to an increased release of oxytocin, which can then influence the body's physiological states, including tear production. When the nervous system is in a state of safety and emotional attunement, it becomes more attuned to sensations, and oxytocin serves as a key mediator in this process. As oxytocin increases, it has a direct effect on the brain's emotional centers, particularly the limbic system, which governs emotional responses. This makes the individual not only more likely to feel pleasure, but also more likely to experience a surge of overwhelming emotion that can manifest as tears. For women, this is a particularly pronounced effect because of how estrogen interacts with the oxytocin system, enhancing the sensitivity to oxytocin's effects. This heightened sensitivity can trigger profound emotional and physiological responses. Tears in such a context are not the result of distress or sadness. They are more like an emotional catharsis, a physical and emotional release that aligns with the body's state of relaxation and surrender. Oxytocin, in this case, plays a crucial role in modulating the body's stress response, creating a sense of security and comfort that allows emotional release. The act of crying from pleasure, particularly in intimate situations, is the body's way of acknowledging that a deep need for connection and safety has been met. This is not simply a matter of emotional overload. It is a reflection of how the nervous system processes and releases energy when the body feels fully supported and safe. What is particularly fascinating is the bidirectional relationship between the vagus nerve and oxytocin. As the vagus nerve is activated through deep breathing, prolonged physical touch, or other soothing interactions, oxytocin is released, which further enhances the sense of emotional connection. This relationship creates a feedback loop where the body's physiological response to pleasure, slower heart rate, deeper breathing, and more relaxed muscle tension, encourages the release of oxytocin, which in turn encourages more of those pleasurable sensations. The relationship between these two systems is one of profound synchrony, and in moments of high emotional intensity, this synchrony can lead to tears, which are often misinterpreted as signs of pain or sadness, when in fact they may be signs of profound emotional relief and joy. These tears, driven by oxytocin and the vagus nerve's influence, serve as a reminder of the body's innate ability to heal through connection. In deep, emotionally resonant experiences, oxytocin allows individuals, particularly women, to let go of stored emotional tension, which may have built up over time. In this sense, crying is not merely a symptom of sadness, it can be seen as a form of emotional and physiological cleansing. The pleasure that accompanies such a release is not just in the physical sensations of the moment, but in the profound relief that comes with the body's capacity to let go of long-held stress and tension. This is why tears can coexist with pleasure, and why oxytocin's role in this process is so crucial. It enables a state of emotional and physical vulnerability where the body can finally release, cry, and feel pleasure simultaneously. When we use the term position in this context, it's important to understand that it doesn't refer to a particular physical posture or stance. Instead, it refers to a specific neurological state that transcends mere physical positioning. The term is meant to encapsulate a state of deep emotional attunement, trust, and physiological balance, a position of vulnerability, safety, and connection. It's this state that underpins the possibility of crying from pleasure, and it's not necessarily tied to one specific activity or situation. The position we're referring to is, in essence, a state of the nervous system. To understand this, we must look at the body's autonomic nervous system, which controls functions that are largely outside of conscious control, like heart rate, digestion, and respiratory rate. This system has two main branches: the sympathetic nervous system, which prepares the body for action, fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs relaxation and recovery, rest and digest. The parasympathetic system, when fully activated, creates the conditions for deep emotional and physical states of pleasure because it allows the body to enter a state of calm, openness, and receptivity. The vagus nerve, one of the key elements in the parasympathetic nervous system, plays a central role in this process. The vagus nerve connects the brain to many vital organs, including the heart, lungs, and digestive system, and it is crucial in regulating heart rate, breathing, and stress responses. When this nerve is activated, the body shifts into a state of relaxation and safety. In such a state, the body becomes more attuned to sensory experiences, which makes emotional connection more profound and physical pleasure more accessible. It is in this neurological position that crying from pleasure becomes possible, because the body is no longer in a defensive, protective mode, but instead in a receptive, surrendering state. This shift from a defensive state to a relaxed, open state doesn't just involve the autonomic nervous system, it's also facilitated by social cues and interpersonal dynamics. In close relationships, particularly those marked by trust and emotional resonance, the body can enter this relaxed position more easily. This is because emotional attunement, the act of being fully present with another person, matching their emotional state and feeling deeply understood, is a powerful signal to the nervous system that it is safe to open up. The more attuned two people are to one another, the more likely the body is to enter this state of parasympathetic dominance, where physical and emotional pleasure can be fully experienced. When this alignment happens, it often results in a profound release. In the case of women, the combination of emotional connection and physiological relaxation leads to the activation of oxytocin, the hormone responsible for bonding, trust, and emotional warmth. Oxytocin plays a significant role in facilitating the body's transition into this state of openness and release. As oxytocin levels rise, the body's emotional response to stimuli becomes more pronounced, and the individual becomes more likely to cry as a way to release built-up tension. In this case, the tears are not a sign of sadness, but of emotional release and a kind of cathartic joy. This process is not limited to intimate sexual encounters. It can also occur in deep non-physical connections, such as those forged through meaningful conversation, shared vulnerability, or emotional support. The position of safety and emotional attunement can be found in a variety of contexts, not just those involving physical touch or intimacy. In fact, crying from pleasure is just as likely to happen during a non-physical exchange as it is in a romantic or sexual one, because what matters most is the emotional position of trust, openness, and attunement between individuals. In moments where this alignment occurs, where emotional connection, physical safety, and neurological relaxation meet, tears become the body's natural expression of deep emotional release. The body is no longer holding on to stress, fear, or tension. Instead, it is releasing that energy, allowing for pleasure and emotional clarity to flood the system. The crying that occurs during such moments is not indicative of distress or sadness, but of the body's ability to open up fully, to surrender to the emotional experience, and to release whatever has been held within. This is the true position of emotional and physical alignment, a position of openness, connection, and ultimately pleasure. Neuroscience as a field is often seen as sterile, abstract, or even distant from the more emotional aspects of human experience. The brain is frequently depicted as a mechanical organ filled with neurons firing away, processing information, and generating behavior. But in reality, neuroscience is intimately tied to the heart of human experience. And understanding the brain's processes allows us to comprehend the profound emotional and physical states that define what it means to be human. The more we explore the workings of the nervous system, the more we come to realize that the body's capacity to feel, connect, and experience pleasure is not just an emotional or psychological phenomenon, but a deeply biological one. This insight helps us understand why moments of intense emotional connection, such as crying from pleasure, are not just emotionally significant, but biologically inevitable. One of the primary reasons for this lies in the deep connections between the brain and the body. Our emotions are not merely in our heads, they manifest through physiological changes in the body. The vagus nerve, for example, which plays a key role in regulating the parasympathetic nervous system, also communicates between the brain and the organs. This connection is not one way, it is bidirectional. That means the brain doesn't just influence the body influences the brain. This relationship forms the basis of embodied cognition, which posits that the mind is not isolated from the body, but is intricately connected to it. The act of crying from pleasure, for instance, involves this intricate interplay. Oxytocin, a hormone and neuropeptide that plays a central role in social bonding and emotional regulation, is released during times of deep emotional connection and physical touch. It affects brain regions like the amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotions and fear. When oxytocin levels rise, the amygdala's response to fear and threat is dampened. This allows the body to enter a state of relaxation and receptivity, which is essential for experiencing heightened emotional states and pleasure. But the process doesn't end there. As oxytocin facilitates emotional attunement, the vagus nerve is also activated, bringing the body into a parasympathetic state. This state is often accompanied by physiological changes such as a slower heart rate, deeper breathing, and a calm, grounded demeanor. These physical changes signal the body's ability to let go of stress and embrace vulnerability. This physiological state of safety and relaxation sets the stage for crying, particularly in intimate or emotionally intense situations. The body's response to a perceived safe environment is to release. The release is not necessarily sadness or grief, but a shedding of the emotional weight that has accumulated over time. When the nervous system feels safe, it no longer needs to guard itself against perceived threats or emotional overload. The tears that result are part of a broader biological process of emotional catharsis, a way for the body to process and release emotional energy. This release can be both pleasurable and healing, as it allows the body to return to a more balanced state. What makes this so significant is that neuroscience allows us to appreciate the complexity and interdependence of these emotional and physical responses. There is a tendency to think of pleasure as a simple, isolated experience, one that occurs when certain triggers are present, but neuroscience reveals that pleasure is a holistic process. It is the result of many systems coming together in harmony: the brain, the nervous system, the heart, and the hormones that regulate them. This interconnectedness is what makes moments of deep emotional release so powerful. They are the culmination of a finely tuned system working in unison to bring the body to a place of emotional release and recovery. Furthermore, this understanding of the biological basis of emotional release and pleasure brings us closer to a more compassionate understanding of human behavior. When we recognize that crying from pleasure is not a sign of weakness or emotional instability, but rather a natural outcome of the body reaching a place of safety, trust, and deep connection, we can begin to embrace the full range of human emotional experiences. In fact, understanding the neuroscience behind these experiences not only demystifies them, but also allows us to appreciate how the body and mind are intertwined in the most intimate aspects of our lives. This is not just romantic, it is biological, and it is central to what it means to be fully human. When we say all women cry from pleasure in this position, we are pointing to a deep, universal truth about human biology, emotional expression, and connection. However, the statement itself is not meant to be taken literally in all cases, but rather as a metaphor for the extraordinary potential of human connection and the body's capacity to release stored emotional tension. The position we refer to is not about a particular physical posture or location, but a state of being that aligns the mind, body, and emotions in such a way that deep emotional release in the form of tears becomes possible. And in that release, there is not just catharsis, but a profound sense of pleasure, both physical and emotional. This dynamic has roots in the intricate processes of the nervous system, particularly the parasympathetic system, which is responsible for states of relaxation and emotional balance. The parasympathetic system helps regulate the body's responses to stress, facilitating a state in which the body can let go of tension and embrace emotional vulnerability. The vagus nerve, a critical component of the parasympathetic system, plays a vital role in bringing about this state. It is through the vagus nerve that the body enters a more relaxed and open state, allowing us to be more in tune with our emotions and physical sensations. It is this physiological and emotional openness that creates the conditions for pleasure. And it is also what makes crying from pleasure a potential outcome when emotional and physical boundaries dissolve. The vagus nerve in this case serves as a sort of bridge between the mind and the body, carrying signals from the brain to the rest of the body and vice versa. When the vagus nerve is activated, particularly through touch, emotional connection, or deep synchronized breathing, the body transitions into a state of calmness and receptivity. This transition is essential for pleasure to be fully experienced because the body must be in a relaxed and unguarded state to fully embrace emotional and sensory experiences. It is only in this position of safety and relaxation that oxytocin, the bonding hormone, can be released in significant amounts, further deepening emotional connection and facilitating the process of emotional release. The beauty of this process is that it is not limited to a specific type of relationship or experience. While intimacy or physical touch is often a catalyst for such emotional responses, the neurological and physiological conditions that allow for crying from pleasure can occur in many different contexts. Whether it is during a moment of shared laughter with a close friend, an emotionally vulnerable conversation, or a deeply supportive connection with a partner, the body can enter this state of openness and release. The key factor is not the type of interaction, but the depth of emotional attunement and the level of safety and trust that exists in the relationship. In these moments, the brain and body are in sync, and the individual is able to experience emotional and physical sensations in their fullest form. Crying in this context becomes a natural outcome of the body releasing stored emotional tension. For women especially, the connection between oxytocin and emotional expression is especially pronounced. Due to the hormonal influences of estrogen, which enhances oxytocin's effects, women tend to be more emotionally expressive and sensitive to oxytocin's impact. As oxytocin levels rise, the brain's stress responses, particularly those in the amygdala, begin to subside. With these emotional defenses relaxed, the body is free to release the emotional energy that has been building up, often leading to tears of joy, relief, or deep emotional fulfillment. Importantly, this process does not happen in isolation. It is the culmination of multiple systems working in harmony. The position that allows crying from pleasure to take place is not simply a physiological state, but also an emotional and psychological one. It is a state of connection, whether physical or emotional, where the individual feels seen, safe, and supported. The feeling of being held, understood, or loved in a moment of deep emotional vulnerability activates a cascade of responses that bring the mind and body into alignment. In this state, the person is not just reacting to external stimuli, but is experiencing a profound internal shift, a shift that enables both pleasure and emotional release to co-occur. Therefore, when we consider the phrase, "all women cry from pleasure" in this position, it's a metaphor for the profound interconnectedness of our biology, emotions, and relationships. It emphasizes the biological mechanisms that facilitate emotional release, while also highlighting the deep psychological and emotional bonds that make such releases possible. The phrase reminds us that crying is not always a sign of sadness or distress, but can be a powerful expression of joy, pleasure, and release, a natural outcome of the human body's ability to surrender, let go, and experience the full range of its emotional and physical potential.